She woke to the soft crunch of snow on the porch. At first she thought it was the wind, until she saw him. A massive bear standing silently outside her cabin, eyes fixed on her. He didn't move closer, didn't roar, he just watched. And she had no idea why. The wind had grown sharper by midnight, carrying the icy scent of the surrounding forest. Snowflakes hit the cabin roof in soft, uneven pings, like the distant percussion of a drum, marking the rhythm of the night. She had long ago stopped counting the hours, but the forest had a way of making time feel both endless and urgent. Emma, her wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, had just slid into bed when she heard it, a crunch. Not the subtle, uniform tapping of falling snow, but deliberate, heavy. Someone or something moving across the freshly fallen blanket of white outside. She froze. Her heartbeat erupted in her chest. There was no reason for a human to be wandering through this remote stretch of wilderness at this hour, not when the storm had begun in earnest. She strained her ears, listening. The sound came again, a deliberate step, then a pause, followed by the faint rustle of movement through the snow-laden pine needles. Emma swung her legs over the side of the bed, boots already at the ready. She reached for the flashlight on the nightstand but hesitated. The window. She could see through the frost-covered pane. Her fingers traced the outline of the glass, every nerve on edge. And then she saw him. A massive brown bear standing just beyond the edge of the porch. At first she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. How could such a colossal animal be so still, so deliberate? But there was no mistaking the amber gleam in those deep-set eyes, reflecting the faint glow of the cabin lantern. He was watching her. He didn't roar. He didn't pace. He didn't make any aggressive move. He simply stood there, quiet, powerful, and impossibly calm for an animal that size. Every instinct screamed at Emma to retreat, to slam the door and barricade herself inside. Her breath hitched, forming small clouds in the icy air of the cabin. The bear shifted, a subtle movement, a slight weight adjustment, and snow fell from the overhanging branches, sprinkling down over his broad shoulders. Emma's muscles tensed, frozen between fear and fascination. Her mind raced. How close was he? Was this a territorial claim? A predator assessing its prey? Or something else entirely? The snowstorm intensified, gusts rattling the window frames, draping the pine branches in heavier white. Emma crouched low, watching, heart hammering in her chest, wondering if even a slow step toward the door would provoke a reaction. The bear's eyes, steady and unwavering, held her gaze. A flicker of something there, patience, curiosity, maybe even recognition, made her chest tighten. She debated her options. The flashlight could illuminate her, making her presence obvious, but also potentially threatening. She could wait in silence, hope he moves on. Or she could retreat further into the cabin, risking her own anxiety escalating with every second of his unblinking watch. Her hand brushed the cold brass doorknob, icy against her palm. She could see the snow compress under the bear's paws, each step deliberate, precise, and heavy enough to make the earth groan beneath him. The storm masked some of the sound, but not enough. It was a tactile, almost intimate sensation. The forest was alive and it had noticed her. A sudden gust blew through the trees, rattling a thick branch above the porch. Snow cascaded down, startling her. The bear's head flicked toward the sound, ears twitching. Emma's stomach clenched. He was aware of everything, the storm, the branches, her presence, and yet he stayed put. She dared a small step toward the window just to get a clearer view. The bear didn't flinch. He simply remained, immense and calm, his amber eyes locked on hers. She noticed something else now, the way his shoulders sloped, the curve of his neck, the gentle but unmistakable breath mist curling into the cold air. This was not aggression. Not yet, anyway. But the stillness was almost worse, the uncertainty of intent. Minutes stretched like hours. Emma's mind oscillated between rationality and fear. What would happen if he charged? Could she escape? Did she even have time to think about escape? Every horror scenario she had imagined in her life seemed suddenly real. And then, a sound unlike any she had anticipated, a soft sniffing from the porch as if the bear was sensing her in a way deeper than sight or sound. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. A voice in her head whispered, "Do not move. Do not provoke him. Just wait." She inched backward, lowering herself slightly behind the cabin wall, trying to blend with the shadows. Her eyes never left the bear. He shifted again, a subtle shuffle, sending another flake of snow cascading to the wooden porch boards. The weight, the quiet authority, the calmness, all of it pressed down on her like the storm itself. And then, just as she thought the moment could not stretch further, he made a small, deliberate movement toward the edge of the porch. A single paw lifted, pressing softly into the snow, before settling again. Emma's breath hitched, frozen between terror and awe. The storm seemed to pause in recognition of the unspoken truce. One wrong move and either could change the course of the night. She leaned closer to the window, whispering to herself, "What are you doing here?" The bear's amber eyes remained fixed on her, silent and unreadable, but something in their depth told her this was no ordinary encounter. It was a moment suspended between fear and understanding, danger and something else she could not yet name. And then a quiet noise, the faintest sound almost drowned by the wind, a low exhale, deliberate and patient, like a signal that the night had only just begun. Emma realized she had a choice: retreat fully into the warmth and safety of the cabin, or face the storm and the unknown presence of this massive creature in front of her. But before she could decide, the bear made another subtle shift. He tilted his massive head slightly, eyes glinting, and suddenly it was clear: he was not leaving. Not yet. A sudden crack echoed from the forest edge. The bear's ears flicked sharply and Emma's heart skipped a beat. Whatever had just broken the silence was now drawing both of their attention. Emma's pulse was still hammering, but the cold air gave her a sharp clarity. Every instinct screamed, "Stay inside, stay quiet, don't provoke him." Yet the bear didn't move forward. He didn't roar, didn't charge. He simply observed. His presence was overwhelming, massive, and somehow deliberate. She slid a few steps back into the cabin, her boots crunching softly against the wooden floorboards. The bear's amber eyes followed, unblinking. The contrast of warmth from inside the cabin and the biting chill outside made her shiver. She pulled her scarf tighter, pressing against the doorway for a better vantage point. Outside, the snowstorm intensified. Wind whipped around the cabin, rattling the shutters and shaking loose powder from the pine branches overhead. The bear shifted slightly, paw digging gently into the snow, leaving an impression of immense weight. Each move was deliberate, controlled, as if he were assessing the situation, or perhaps assessing her. Emma's mind raced. She thought about her options. She could close the door fully, risk isolating herself and possibly triggering the bear's curiosity further. Or she could stay at the threshold, hoping to communicate non-verbally that she posed no threat. Her hand hovered over the doorframe, frozen. The storm's rhythm, the bear's weight, her own rapid heartbeat, all synchronized into a tense tableau. Then came a new sound, a low snapping of a branch from deeper in the forest. The bear's ears flicked instantly. Emma's stomach sank. He was aware of the forest as much as he was aware of her. And the sound didn't come from him. Something else moved in the storm. A shadow flickered behind the pines, barely visible, and both of them froze. Her breath came in shallow, visible puffs. The cabin's lantern cast long shadows across the snow, flickering with the wind. Each snowflake seemed suspended midair as if time itself had slowed. Emma crouched lower, gripping the edge of the doorway, trying to appear smaller, less threatening. She could feel the tension radiating from the bear, the same way she felt it from the air around her. Minutes dragged. The storm intensified and Emma began noticing subtle details. The bear's ears rotated independently, sniffing the wind. His claws, slightly exposed, left crisp impressions in the snow. Yet there was no aggression. No growl. Only careful observation. Something about the patience in his movements was unnerving, almost human in its awareness. Emma's mind flicked to the thought that had crossed her before: could he simply be curious? Protective? Or was he waiting for something she couldn't yet see? She wished she had binoculars or even a better vantage point, but retreating further into the cabin was out of the question. One false move could shatter this delicate balance. The storm threw another gust against the cabin wall, rattling the door. Snow swirled in chaotic patterns, blanketing the footprints she had tried to erase. The bear's nose twitched as he sniffed the wind, amber eyes flicking to the darkened forest beyond. His body shifted, weight pressing firmly into the snow. Emma could see the frost on his fur glistening in the lantern light, each individual strand highlighted by the cold, damp air. She made herself small, pressing against the wood. She could feel the rough texture under her fingers, grounding her in the moment. The bear remained just outside, immovable, patient. She wondered if he could sense her uncertainty. His gaze followed hers with meticulous attention. Each blink, each small inhale of cold air, seemed synchronized with hers. Suddenly, the bear rose onto all fours, towering just enough to remind her of his size. The sheer presence of him pressed against her chest. She stifled a gasp. The wind howled, rattling the cabin's eaves, but the bear's attention never wavered. Instead, he made a subtle movement, A soft paw stepped closer to the edge of the porch. Emma's mind raced. Could this be a threat? Or was he merely shifting to adjust to the terrain? Every instinct she had screamed, "Don't move, don't provoke him." Yet curiosity edged in. She wanted to understand him, to read what he was thinking. And in the icy quiet between gusts of wind, she thought she saw it. A flicker of hesitation in his amber eyes, a pause that almost seemed reflective. Her stomach knotted. This wasn't the usual bear behavior she had read about. This wasn't a predator testing its prey. This was something else. A presence so controlled, so aware, that it left her in awe even as fear coiled around her chest. Emma considered the simplest option: retreat to the cabin fully and lock herself in. But the bear was still there, his amber eyes following her, watching, and for reasons she didn't yet understand, she felt that leaving the threshold might provoke something unintended. There was a rhythm here, a silent negotiation neither of them fully understood. And then, the worst sound she could imagine in that tense moment, a distant crack from a heavy branch falling somewhere deeper in the snow-laden forest. The bear's ears flicked sharply and his head turned toward the sound. Emma's breath hitched. The storm masked the origin of the noise, but both she and the bear were frozen in instant reaction, aware that the forest held more than just snow and shadows tonight. Her heart raced, every muscle coiled, waiting. The bear's massive body tensed slightly, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. Emma pressed herself closer against the doorway, knuckles white against the wood. The storm whipped around them, snowflakes hitting her hair and jacket, landing silently as if suspended in air. She could see the breath mist curling from the bear's muzzle, glistening in the lantern light. And then, in a moment suspended between fear and anticipation, he shifted again, paw lifted, amber eyes locking with hers for a heartbeat longer than seemed possible. From the forest edge, a shadow moved just beyond the tree line, visible for only an instant in the swirling snow. The bear's ears twitched, and Emma knew that whatever it was, neither of them were safe yet. If you were trapped in a cabin with a bear outside during a storm, would you try to leave or stay inside? The storm was relentless now. Snow whipped around the cabin in chaotic, swirling sheets, forming small drifts against the porch. The wind roared through the surrounding pine forest, bending trunks and shaking loose branches so that every snap and crack carried like a gunshot in the stillness of night. Emma's pulse pounded in her chest, each beat magnified against the roar of the storm. She had moved closer to the window, pressing a hand to the frost-covered glass, peering out at the bear who still hadn't budged. He was enormous, and yet, even in that wild, blinding storm, he seemed aware, not just of her presence but of the surrounding forest. Every twitch of an ear, every slight turn of his massive head, indicated attentiveness. He was waiting, watching, as if the night itself was part of some silent negotiation. Emma wondered if he sensed the same shadow she had glimpsed earlier at the edge of the trees. Time seemed to slow. Snowflakes hung in the air like tiny suspended crystals. The bear shifted slightly, moving his weight from one paw to another, leaving deep impressions in the fresh snow. Emma could see each movement in exquisite detail, frost forming along the thick contours of his fur. And despite the storm, despite the fear that gripped her chest like an iron band, there was a rhythm to his motion, almost methodical, almost deliberate. She pressed closer to the window. The cabin's warm lantern glow spilled outward, casting amber light across the snow, illuminating the bear's massive frame. He didn't flinch. He didn't growl. He didn't make a single aggressive move. And yet, the tension in the air was suffocating. She could feel it pressing against her chest, mingling with the wind that slipped through tiny gaps in the cabin walls. The shadow in the forest moved again. This time more distinctly. Something small, low to the ground, slipping between the trees with careful, cautious motions. Emma's stomach tightened. A cub? Could it be a cub? She hadn't seen any movement beyond that fleeting glimpse, but instinct told her that the bear's attention wasn't entirely on her. Something else in the forest was pulling his focus. Her mind raced. If it was a cub and if the mother bear was protective, she had to tread carefully. One wrong move, one sudden gesture, and she could provoke a reaction that neither she nor the cub would survive. She swallowed hard, pressing herself as close to the window as possible, trying to remain unseen. Her breath fogged the glass and she wiped it away slowly, careful not to attract attention. The bear shifted again, sniffing the air, amber eyes scanning the immediate vicinity of the porch. Emma noticed subtle changes in his posture, the muscles in his shoulders tensing, claws flexing slightly against the snow. Yet there was no aggression, just awareness and an unspoken patience. The storm seemed to pause around him, as if acknowledging his presence as the forest's axis of calm and power. Emma's hands were trembling now. She pressed them together, trying to control her breathing, but the cold gnawed at her fingers. She considered retreating further into the cabin, hiding behind walls and furniture, but her curiosity, mingled with terror, wouldn't allow it. She needed to understand why he was here, why he hadn't moved on. The storm's roar seemed distant compared to the intense focus between her and the bear. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. The shadow moved again, closer this time, just beyond the edge of the clearing where the bear stood. Emma's heart lurched. There was no mistaking it. Something small, vulnerable, exposed to the storm and entirely dependent on the mother bear. The bear's head turned slightly, amber eyes flicking to the forest edge. Emma held her breath. The air between them vibrated with unspoken understanding. His gaze returned to her, and for the first time she noticed it, the subtle softness, the lack of hostility. Something protective, patient, and deliberate glimmered in those eyes. He wasn't here to attack. He was here to watch, to guard, to assess the situation, both the cub and her. Emma's mind raced. She had studied wildlife behavior for years, yet nothing had prepared her for this. The bear was massive, capable of destruction, yet he remained calm, balanced, almost sentient in his observation. The cub moved again, making a soft rustle in the snow. The mother bear flicked her ears toward the sound, a low exhale escaping her, mist curling into the cold night air. Emma felt an unfamiliar surge of empathy, mixed with lingering fear. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a test, a moment suspended between her safety and her willingness to understand another creature. She knew she couldn't leave the cabin, yet she also knew that retreating fully might be misread by the bear. Her gaze flicked between the cub and the bear, and she realized the subtle truth. The bear's attention wasn't fixed on her for aggression. He was assessing her capacity for patience, for respect, for understanding the delicate balance unfolding in the snow-laden forest. Every movement she made could tip that balance. The storm's intensity peaked suddenly, a blast of wind rattling the cabin and sending a cascade of snow onto the porch. The bear stiffened, muscles rippling, amber eyes scanning the forest beyond. Emma pressed herself lower against the doorframe, every sense heightened. She could see the cub struggling slightly in the snow, lost, vulnerable, shivering against the storm. The mother bear's attention flicked momentarily toward her, and Emma felt the weight of judgment in that gaze. Time slowed further. She felt as though she were part of the forest itself, suspended between the howling wind, the relentless snow, and the silent scrutiny of one of nature's most powerful guardians. The bear's head turned slightly, amber eyes locking with hers in a moment that seemed eternal. And in that instant she understood. Whatever happened next would not be simple. This stormy night, this frozen wilderness, this silent, watching guardian, it was a test of instinct, courage, and empathy. From the far edge of the clearing, the cub emerged fully into view, tiny and trembling, as the mother bear shifted her weight forward. Emma realized the next moment could determine whether she became a witness to a tragedy, or the start of an extraordinary bond. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she watched the movement at the forest edge. The small, shivering shape emerging from the white expanse was unmistakably a bear cub. Its fur was damp with snow, matted in places, and it stumbled slightly on the uneven terrain. The mother bear, the enormous one she had been watching, flicked her ears toward the cub and lowered her massive head slightly, sniffing and listening with meticulous care. Emma's fear momentarily transformed into awe. She had never witnessed a wild mother bear act with such calm, deliberate vigilance. Every movement was measured. The shifting of weight, the subtle pivot of a shoulder, the lowering of the head to gauge the cub's distance. It was not aggression. It was protection, strategy, and an almost intelligent patience that made her chest tighten in wonder. The cub paused, its small legs trembling against the snow. Emma could see how vulnerable it was, tiny compared to the towering pine trees, exposed to both the storm and the vast wilderness around it. And yet, despite its fragility, the cub seemed aware of the mother's presence, its gaze flicking instinctively toward her protector. Emma realized in that moment that the mother bear wasn't watching her for fearsome dominance. She was assessing her, gauging whether she could be trusted near the cub. Emma's pulse raced. Her thoughts collided. If I step outside, will she see me as a threat? Could I save the cub without endangering myself? The storm roared around her, snowflakes slicing across the clearing, yet she felt as if time had slowed. Every rustle of branches, every whisper of wind carried weight. The bear's amber eyes flicked from the cub to Emma, and she felt the unspoken communication. This was her test. Her instinct screamed caution. She crouched lower, hands gripping the cold wood of the cabin frame. A single misstep could provoke a defensive reaction from the mother bear. And yet, another part of her, empathy, the part that had led her deep into the wilderness to witness and protect life, urged her forward. The cub moved again, shivering against the storm. Its small nose twitched, sniffing the wind, searching for stability. Emma noticed something crucial. A fallen branch had trapped part of the cub's paw. It struggled, caught, unable to free itself. Panic prickled along Emma's spine. She had been waiting for a moment like this, the moment when action became inevitable. The mother bear shifted closer to the cub, but still remained cautious, a powerful sentinel in the storm. She exhaled slowly, warm mist curling from her muzzle. Emma realized the bear wasn't advancing toward her because she had not yet proven herself a threat. She could feel the gravity of the decision pressing down. The next move would define trust between human and bear. Emma's mind raced through the possibilities. She could remain hidden, silently observing, risking the cub's life in the process. Or she could move carefully, slowly, showing neither aggression nor sudden motion. Her pulse accelerated as she inched closer to the doorway, assessing the space between her and the snow-laden clearing. Every step had to be deliberate. She had learned in her studies of wildlife behavior that sudden movements were interpreted as threats. Yet staying completely still also had consequences. If the cub could not free itself, the storm might overwhelm it. Emma weighed the risks, her eyes flicking from cub to mother bear, reading subtle signs in muscle tension, ear position, and eye focus. The mother bear shifted her massive head, amber eyes locking with Emma's for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. There was a warning there, not a threat but a boundary. Approach carefully, respect the cub, respect me. Emma nodded slightly to herself, taking a shallow, steadying breath. She stepped lightly onto the porch, boots crunching softly against compacted snow. The bear's head turned, tracking her movement. The cub trembled but took a tentative step forward, paw still caught. Emma's gloved hands reached toward it slowly, fingers open, showing no sudden aggression. The mother bear exhaled again, watching. Her presence radiated immense power, and yet there was patience, a careful calculation in her stance. Emma reached the cub, kneeling slowly, keeping herself low. Her gloved hands brushed the snow from the tiny paw, carefully freeing it from the branch. The cub whimpered softly, a sound almost drowned by the storm, then shuffled into the woman's outstretched arms. The mother bear observed every motion, muscles rippling beneath thick fur, eyes never leaving Emma or her cub. A tense moment stretched into eternity. The wind blew fiercely, snow falling around them in chaotic patterns. Emma's heart thudded, the cold biting her fingers despite gloves. The cub nuzzled into her coat, shivering, and she felt its fragility like a physical weight pressing against her chest. The mother bear's gaze softened ever so slightly, a subtle acknowledgement. She wasn't leaving, but neither was she striking. Emma understood the truth of the night. The bear had not come to threaten her. She had misread the intention. The bear had waited, silently observing, guarding her, testing her capacity for empathy, for patience, for understanding. The storm had been a backdrop for this revelation, a trial in which every instinct had been measured, every movement weighed. The cub wriggled in her arms, and the mother bear let out a low exhale, mist curling in the cold air. It was a sound of recognition, a momentary connection bridging two species in the frozen wilderness. Emma's chest swelled with cautious relief. She realized she was witnessing a form of communication far deeper than fear or threat, a silent negotiation, a test of trust, a revelation of the bear's intelligence and emotional depth. Then, without warning, the mother bear shifted toward the forest, signaling the cub to follow. Emma froze. Would she retreat back to the cabin? Would she follow, risking proximity to the powerful guardian? The storm raged, the snow swirled violently, and the cub clung for a heartbeat longer in Emma's arms, hesitant but alive. As the mother bear stepped fully into the storm, the cub clutched Emma's sleeve for just a second longer, and she realized this night, this storm, was far from over. Whatever bond had begun was only the first chapter, and the forest held more trials yet to come. If you had the chance to help a wild animal in danger, would you risk your own safety to do it? The mother bear moved with deliberate caution, leading the cub deeper into the snow-laden clearing. Emma's heart ached at the sight of the small, trembling creature in her arms. Every instinct screamed to protect, to comfort, yet every rational thought warned her of the immense risk. She was a human, fragile in comparison to the immense strength of the wild guardian watching her every move. Snowflakes clung to her hair and coat as she knelt, keeping her body low. The cub whimpered softly, nuzzling against her scarf for warmth, and Emma felt a surge of protective instinct she hadn't anticipated. Her hands brushed the damp fur gently, careful not to make sudden movements. The mother bear's gaze followed every gesture, amber eyes locked on hers, radiating a mixture of vigilance and cautious understanding. The wind howled, driving snow in sharp, icy gusts that made her eyelashes frost over. Emma pulled the cub closer, noticing how frail and fragile it seemed against the vast, cold wilderness. She wondered how it had survived this long in the storm, exposed and vulnerable. Each breath, each shiver, was a reminder of the delicate balance between life and danger in the wild. The mother bear paused, turning her massive head slightly, watching Emma as if weighing her intentions. Emma's hands remained open, non-threatening, and her movements deliberate. She whispered softly, a quiet, almost instinctual plea, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The words were barely audible over the storm, yet the bear's attention did not waver. Emma glanced down at the cub. Its small claws pressed lightly against her coat as if seeking stability, seeking reassurance. She realized that while the mother had been observing her, the cub now trusted her in a way that transcended species. A fragile bond had begun to form, precarious but real. Her mind raced through scenarios. Could she guide the cub back toward shelter without provoking the mother bear? Or was the storm too dangerous to attempt movement? Every step, every sound carried consequences she could not fully predict. She made a decision, careful patience. One measured movement at a time, showing respect and understanding. The mother bear shifted her weight slightly, as if granting silent permission for the cub to be near Emma. The small creature leaned lightly into her arms, and she felt the warmth of life pulsing, fragile yet resilient. Snow clung to the cub's fur, melting slightly against her gloves. The storm roared around them, but within that small circle of survival, a moment of connection existed, a fragile interspecies trust that felt impossible in the midst of the wilderness. Emma's fingers brushed the cub's ears, gently stroking the coarse fur. She whispered again, soft and careful, "You're safe, for now." The cub responded with a small nuzzle, tiny body trembling against hers. She noticed the mother bear watching with a mixture of patience and calculation. Every movement was intentional. The bear was testing her, gauging whether she could act responsibly in this delicate situation. The snowstorm intensified, gusts slapping against the cabin walls and swirling through the clearing. Emma's boots pressed into the soft, snow-covered ground as she slowly adjusted her position, careful not to make sudden movements. The cub shivered again and she pressed it closer, instinctively shielding it from the icy wind. She realized in that suspended moment that compassion was both a gift and a risk. The storm was a reminder of the wild's indifference, yet the mother bear's presence and the cub's fragile trust created a temporary bridge, a fleeting connection that demanded care, patience, and courage. Emma's gaze flicked back to the cabin. Warmth, shelter, and human safety beckoned, yet she knew that leaving now would break the fragile trust established between her and the animals. Every instinct she had learned in her studies of wildlife behavior whispered caution. Yet empathy, the raw human response to life in danger, propelled her forward. A distant snap echoed through the forest, a branch under snow giving way. The mother bear stiffened, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. Amber eyes flicked toward the sound, then back to Emma. She froze, holding the cub even tighter, feeling the raw tension in the clearing. The bear exhaled slowly, the warm mist rising in the cold night air. It was not aggression. It was awareness, vigilance, a silent message. The wilderness is unpredictable and one must remain present, careful, and respectful. Emma shifted slightly, ensuring the cub remained balanced and warm in her arms. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "We can get through this, together." The cub nuzzled closer, tiny body warm against her own, and she felt a connection stronger than fear, a fragile thread of trust extending across the divide between human and wild. The mother bear shifted again, leading the cub a few steps deeper into the clearing. Emma mirrored the movement cautiously, keeping low, maintaining distance, but remaining engaged. The storm swirled violently around them, snowflakes clinging to every surface, yet in that chaotic landscape, a quiet understanding emerged. Respect, patience, and compassion could bridge the gap between species, even in the most extreme conditions. Suddenly, through the howl of the storm, a louder, unfamiliar sound erupted from deeper in the forest. A low growl, followed by a rustle that made both Emma and the mother bear freeze. Something was approaching, and whatever it wasn't part of the storm. The howl from deeper in the forest cut sharply through the storm, freezing Emma in place. Her hands instinctively tightened around the cub, whose tiny body trembled not just from cold but from the unfamiliar tension radiating from the clearing. The mother bear stiffened instantly, ears flicking toward the distant rustle, body low and coiled as if ready to spring at any threat. Amber eyes scanned the storm-shrouded trees, calculating, measuring, poised for protective action. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had expected the storm, the snow, even the daunting presence of the mother bear, but the arrival of something else, something potentially dangerous, changed the dynamics entirely. She felt the weight of responsibility for the cub pressing against her chest. Every decision from now on could determine survival, for both her and the small creature she had just begun to protect. The shadow moved again, larger this time, partially hidden by snow-laden branches. Emma couldn't identify it immediately, only that it was powerful, deliberate, and moving closer. Panic threatened to rise, but she forced herself to stay low, calculating her movements carefully. The mother bear mirrored her caution but with authority. Her massive frame shifted, muscles rippling under dense fur, each step deliberate, commanding. She positioned herself slightly between the cub and the approaching threat, signaling dominance and protection. Emma felt both fear and awe. She had studied bear behavior extensively, yet nothing could fully prepare her for this moment, the raw, instinctual display of protective power. The mother bear was a wall of muscle and vigilance, and every instinct she had trained herself to follow told her to remain calm, remain respectful, and stay low. One wrong movement could trigger a defensive strike. The cub whimpered softly in her arms. Emma adjusted her hold, pressing it closer against her chest. Its small claws dug lightly into her coat. The wind gusted sharply, sending snow stinging her face. She pulled the scarf tighter, wishing she could shield both herself and the cub from the storm's harsh bite. She noticed frost clinging to the cub's fur and shivering limbs, a fragile reminder of life in this harsh wilderness. The shadow edged closer and Emma's pulse raced. She caught a fleeting glimpse, another large animal, perhaps a male bear, lumbering through the forest, partially obscured by blowing snow. Its presence explained the growl she had heard, low, resonant, threatening in tone. The mother bear responded instantly, letting out a low, powerful exhale, displaying teeth in a silent warning. The cub pressed tighter against Emma's chest, sensing the tension, sensing the power of the protective figure nearby. Emma's mind raced for options. Retreating into the cabin entirely could provoke the mother bear if she perceived it as abandoning the cub in danger. Remaining in place risked confrontation if the intruding bear pressed closer. She had to find a balance, subtle, non-threatening movements that demonstrated neither aggression nor panic. Every motion had to be calculated, precise, measured in harmony with the storm, the clearing, and the two wild bears. The mother bear took a single, calculated step toward the forest edge, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. Her head lowered slightly, nose to the snow, sniffing, gauging the intruder's position. Amber eyes flicked to Emma for a moment, communicating, "Do not move. Observe. Respect." The weight of that silent command pressed on Emma, but she obeyed instinctively. The intruding bear paused at the edge of visibility, sniffing the air, its large form half hidden by snow and pines. For a tense moment, predator and protector froze, evaluating, measuring distance and risk. The storm roared around them, snow driving into every crevice, masking subtle movements, amplifying tension. The cub shivered again, tiny body vulnerable, yet she could see the mother bear's powerful presence as a shield, a barrier between threat and safety. Emma's thoughts flickered. Could she distract the intruder? Could her presence somehow prevent conflict without angering the mother bear? She realized the solution lay not in action but in stillness. Every movement could escalate tension. Every breath must be silent. She pressed the cub closer to her chest, letting its warmth guide her posture. The storm's gusts provided partial cover, but they also distorted sound and visibility, heightening the stakes. The intruding bear made a sudden step forward, and the mother bear mirrored it with immediate defensive precision. Amber eyes locked, a silent standoff forming in the heart of the stormy clearing. Emma could feel the vibrations of tension through the ground, the subtle shifts of weight beneath snow, the energy radiating from one massive creature to another. She held her breath, heart thundering, fully aware that the smallest misstep could trigger chaos. In that moment she realized the significance of patience, empathy, and restraint. Nature was raw and brutal, but understanding its rules, respecting the signals, observing without interference, could maintain balance. The cub, fragile and trembling, was a living lesson in trust and survival. And the mother bear, with every muscle coiled and every gaze fixed, was the ultimate teacher in controlled power. Snow swirled violently around Emma's face, blurring the clearing into white chaos. Yet through the storm she could see the subtle shifts. The intruding bear's head lowered, assessing, the mother bear's muscles rippling in response. The cub nestled closer, tiny heartbeat pressing against her chest, a fragile pulse of life in the midst of wild power. Suddenly, a gust of wind exposed the intruder fully, revealing it as a massive male bear approaching the clearing, eyes locked on the cub, teeth bared slightly, growl low and menacing. Emma's chest tightened, knowing that the standoff was about to escalate into something she might not control. The snowstorm raged through the night, hammering the cabin with waves of icy wind. Inside, the fire had weakened, its glow shrinking to trembling embers. Lily sat with her knees pulled close, blanket wrapped tight, eyes on the window, on the faint shadow outside that hadn't moved for hours. The bear. Still there. Still watching. Every so often, the wind would clear the fog from the glass just enough for her to see its shape. Broad shoulders, fur weighed down with frost, head lowered as if listening. It wasn't pacing, wasn't searching, just standing. Guarding. She whispered to herself, "You could have left." But maybe that was the point. It hadn't. At dawn, the storm softened into a pale stillness. Snowflakes drifted lazily now, falling straight down in silence. Lily stepped carefully to the door, cracked it open and peered outside. The world was white, blindingly pure, untouched. But the bear was gone. Only a trail of massive prints curved around the cabin and disappeared into the forest. Lily's chest tightened with an unexpected ache. The presence that had terrified her had somehow become a comfort, a reminder that she hadn't been entirely alone through the storm. Hours later, while fetching water from the frozen creek, she heard something, faint but sharp. Not the wind. Not the creak of trees. A whimper. Soft, urgent. She followed the sound along the frozen bank until she found a shape half buried in snow. A small cub, no bigger than a dog, trembling violently. It looked weak, its paw twisted awkwardly under its body. Her first instinct was fear. Where there was a cub, the mother was never far. But the air was too still. Too quiet. She hesitated, scanning the woods, heart pounding. Then she saw it, the faint outline of a bear's body half collapsed against a pine in the distance. The same one that had stood outside her cabin. It wasn't moving. Lily froze. For a long moment she couldn't breathe. The snow around the fallen bear was stained faintly pink, not from blood spilling wildly but from something older, slower, weakness. She stepped closer, boots crunching softly over the crusted snow. The cub whimpered again and the mother's massive head lifted slightly, just enough to look at her. The eyes were dull now, no longer amber bright, but clouded with exhaustion and cold. Yet there was recognition in them. The same quiet gaze that had watched the cabin through the night. Lily sank to her knees in the snow, tears burning behind her eyes. "You stayed," she whispered. "You stayed for me." The bear exhaled a cloud of mist, slow and heavy, and lowered her head again. Without thinking further, Lily pulled her scarf off and wrapped it around the cub. It squirmed weakly but didn't resist. She knew she couldn't save both, the mother was beyond her help, but the cub, maybe. She carried it back to the cabin, her arms trembling with the effort. The cub was heavier than it looked and the trail back felt endless. But when she finally pushed the door open, the warmth of the dying fire hit her face, and she felt something stir, a fragile determination. She laid the cub near the hearth, rubbed its fur dry, fed it small sips of warm water from her canteen. Its breathing steadied. Its tiny paw flexed once, twice, then rested again. Outside, the forest was quiet. No wind, no movement, just the faint hush of falling snow, covering the mother's last resting place beneath a silver-white blanket. Lily sat by the fire all night, unable to sleep. The cub pressed closer, curling its body against her boots, and she reached out, slowly, uncertainly, to rest her hand against its fur. Warm. Alive. And in that fragile warmth, she felt something break and heal at once. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. If the cub would survive, if the storm would return, if she could even feed it long enough to matter. But for that night, it was enough that neither of them were alone. As dawn returned, Lily heard it, a deep, distant sound rolling through the forest. Not thunder. Not wind. A growl. Heavy. Echoing. Another bear was coming. If you were Lily, alone in the wilderness with a cub that isn't yours, would you protect it, knowing what might come searching for it? The growl came again, closer this time. Long, low, and commanding, rolling through the still forest like a warning. Lily froze mid-breath. The cub stirred beside her feet, its small body tensing at the sound, eyes snapping open in alert recognition. She rose slowly, pressing her back to the window, scanning the treeline beyond the glass. The world outside was ghostly white, snow drifting down in lazy spirals, but there, just beyond the last birch, a massive shadow moved. Another bear. Bigger than the mother had been. Its fur darker, thicker, the sheer presence radiating through the cold. It wasn't wandering, it was following the trail. The cub's trail. Lily's pulse hammered against her ribs. She stepped between the fire and the door, her mind spinning through options she didn't really have. Run. Useless. I'd. Nowhere to go. The cabin was sturdy but not impenetrable. The cub whimpered softly, pressing closer to the hearth. The sound caught the bear's attention. Outside, its head turned sharply toward the cabin. For one long moment, it just stood there, nostrils flaring, steam curling from its breath. Lily felt the air thicken, that same primal tension from nights ago. But something about this was different. This wasn't curiosity. It was search. Lost. The kind of sound the forest makes when something is missing. Then came the soft crunch of snow, deliberate, heavy steps moving closer. The bear stopped just a few feet from the door. Lily whispered almost to herself, "You're looking for them." She didn't move for several heartbeats. Then, cautiously, she bent down and lifted the cub into her arms. It squeaked, startled but didn't resist. Its warmth soaked into her chest, trembling against her heartbeat. She took one slow step toward the door. The cabin's wood creaked softly under her boots. The bear outside shifted, its ears flicking toward the sound. When she unlatched the lock, a gust of frigid air burst in, scattering ash and snow through the room. The smell of the forest rushed back, pine, frost, and something ancient. The bear stood just beyond the threshold, towering and motionless. Snow clung to its fur like shards of glass. Its eyes, deep and amber dark, fixed on the cub in her arms. For a moment, everything held still, the storm, the air, even her breath. Then the cub wriggled free and slid to the floor, padding forward on unsteady legs. It gave a tiny cry, soft, plaintive. The bigger bear responded with a deep, low rumble, not anger but recognition. Lily stepped back. Her body trembled, though not from cold this time. She watched as the cub stumbled across the snow, climbing awkwardly toward the massive creature. The large bear lowered its head, gently nudging the cub with its snout. The small one responded with a faint chirp, pressing into its chest. It was a reunion. But then Lily saw it, blood, dark and thick, staining the fur on the big bear's shoulder. The wound wasn't fresh, it was half frozen, half healed. The bear had been fighting something, maybe for territory, maybe for survival, maybe for them. And then, unexpectedly, it looked at her. For one long, unbroken moment, their eyes met through the haze of falling snow. She didn't feel threatened. She felt seen, acknowledged, as though the bear understood what she had done. The bear grunted once, deep, resonant, and turned, nudging the cub toward the trees. Together they began moving into the mist. The cub looked back only once, small eyes catching the orange flicker of firelight spilling from the cabin door. Lily watched until the forest swallowed them both. When she finally shut the door, her legs gave out. She sank to the floor beside the hearth, breath trembling, hands still warm from the cub's fur. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peaceful, filled with something she couldn't name. Outside, the storm had eased. The wind carried only the soft rhythm of snow landing gently on the roof. Lily reached for her journal on the nearby table, flipping past pages filled with plans, lists, and repairs. Then she started to write. Not about fear this time, not about isolation, but about what it meant to be seen in the wild and left unharmed. Her final words before closing the book were simple. They come and go like the snow, wild, fleeting, and kind enough to let you live. The cabin creaked softly as the night settled around it again. The fire popped once, then steadied, filling the space with warm orange light. But just as her eyelids began to drift shut, a sound echoed faintly from outside, distant but unmistakable. A third growl. Not near. Not yet. But out there. Somewhere in the forest. And this one didn't sound like kin. Lily sat upright, the journal slipping from her lap. She blew out the firelight to listen. The forest answered back with another deep roar, closer this time. If you were in Lily's place, would you risk going outside to warn the returning bears, or stay inside to survive alone? Lily didn't move for nearly a full minute. The second growl still echoed faintly in her chest, low and rolling through the trees like a far-off thunder that didn't belong to any storm. Her instincts screamed to stay quiet, not to breathe too loud, not to stir the fire, not to make the cabin feel alive. The air inside thickened, heavy with tension. Her breath fogged the window as she slowly peeked outside. Nothing. Just the dim outline of birches and frost-covered pine trunks, their shadows bending under moonlight. But she knew what she heard. That sound didn't come from the wind. She grabbed the old rifle from above the mantel. It wasn't loaded, hadn't been for years, but it gave her hands something to do, something that felt like control. She crouched low beside the window, eyes sweeping the tree-line again. Then, movement. A dark figure slipped between the trees, too slender for a bear, too tall for a deer. Her heart jolted. It paused, then straightened, unmistakably human. Someone was out there. Her mind raced through impossible questions. Who would be wandering this deep into the woods in winter? Why now? The figure stumbled closer, crunching over snow with uneven steps. A flashlight beam flickered once, then died. Lily's pulse quickened. She set the rifle down and reached for her coat, pulling it over her shoulders. Against every instinct, she unlatched the door and stepped out into the cold. The forest swallowed her immediately. The snow was nearly knee-deep now, the air sharp enough to sting her throat. "Hello," she called, her voice cracking slightly. The only answer was the creak of shifting branches. Then faintly, a groan. She moved toward the sound, boots crunching softly until she saw it. A man half collapsed against a fallen tree. His clothes were torn, his hand pressed to a dark stain spreading across his coat. His face was pale, rimmed with frost, but his eyes opened weakly when she knelt beside him. "Please," he rasped. "The bear." Her stomach dropped. "What about it?" His gaze flickered toward the forest's edge. "It's hurt, not the one you saw, bigger?" He coughed, a raw sound that carried blood. Lily pressed a hand to his shoulder. "You need help. I have a cabin." He shook his head violently. "Don't go back. It's following me." She turned sharply toward the trees. And there, between the trunks, a silhouette moved. Massive. Too massive. The shape of a bear, yes, but not like the others. Taller. Bulkier. Its breath came out in ragged bursts, fog rising like steam. The man tried to stand but stumbled again. Lily grabbed his arm, half dragging, half carrying him through the snow. Behind them, the bear let out a sound. A guttural bellow that tore through the night and sent every bird within miles shrieking skyward. They reached the cabin steps just as the sound came again, closer. She shoved the door open and pulled him inside, slamming the lock behind her. The man collapsed by the fire, gasping. She bolted the windows, heart pounding, mind racing. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Hunter," he muttered, eyes fluttering. "Came for the bears. Didn't know there were more." The realization hit her like a stone. This was why the forest had been restless. Why the bears were roaming closer. They weren't curious, they were being hunted. Outside, a heavy thump rattled the side of the cabin. Snow fell from the roof. The bear was circling. Lily's breath hitched. She grabbed the poker from beside the fire, holding it like a spear. "You brought this here?" she hissed. He didn't answer. His head had slumped forward. The bear's shadow passed over the window, huge, rippling, breathing hard. Its snout pressed briefly to the glass, leaving a fogged patch before pulling away. Then came a sound Lily hadn't heard before, not aggression, not hunger, but pain. The bear was wounded. She saw it now, blood smeared along its flank, glistening dark even in the dim light. The thought crept in uninvited. Was this the same bear that fought for the cubs? If it was, it had come back broken. She stepped closer to the window, hands trembling, trying to make sense of its movements. The bear limped, dragging one paw slightly through the snow. It wasn't trying to break in. It was searching. Sniffing the air, scanning the horizon as though expecting something, or someone. Maybe it was the mate. The cub's father. The idea hit her chest with unexpected weight. The bear wasn't attacking. It was mourning. It had found the hunter's scent, followed it here, and now it was too hurt to leave. But Lily's fragile peace shattered when the bear turned its head, and roared again, the sound shaking the glass. The man on the floor stirred, muttering deliriously, "Finish it, before it comes." Lily looked from him to the bear, one wounded by greed, the other wounded by survival. The doorframe trembled as the bear's paw slammed against it once, twice. Then silence. She stood in that silence for what felt like forever. Every instinct begged her to stay hidden. But something in her refused, the same something that had opened the door for the cub nights ago. She reached for the latch. And from the corner of the room, the man whispered hoarsely, "If you open that door, you won't live to tell it." The door creaked under the bear's weight, hinges moaning as snow drifted through the cracks. Lily's hand hovered over the latch, her reflection trembling in the frosted glass, torn between saving herself or facing what waited beyond. The cabin's walls moaned under the weight of the storm, each gust of wind pushing snow against the door like a living tide. Lily's hand hovered above the latch, her reflection trembling in the frosted glass. On one side of that thin barrier, warmth, safety, and the dying firelight. On the other, a wounded beast that could end her life in a single breath. Behind her, the injured hunter groaned. His breathing was shallow, his lips cracked and pale. "You don't understand," he muttered weakly. "That bear killed my partner. It's not like the others." Lily turned toward him, her voice tight but steady. "Maybe it wasn't the monster you think it is." He blinked through pain, confusion crossing his face. She stepped closer, lowering the poker she still held. "You came into its world. You shot first. And it still hasn't broken through that door." Outside, the bear huffed, a long, ragged exhale that fogged the windowpane. Its breathing was labored, heavy with exhaustion. A faint trail of blood marked the snow where it had circled the cabin. Lily's mind spun. The cubs. The mother. The hunter's bullet. Every fragment of the story she'd lived these past nights collided into one truth. There was no predator here, only consequence. She couldn't watch it die like this. Her hands shook as she reached for her coat again, pulling it tight against the cold. She moved toward the door with slow, deliberate steps. The hunter stirred behind her. "You'll get yourself killed," he rasped. "Maybe," she said softly, but not without trying to make it right. The door creaked as she unlatched it. Snow blew inward immediately, stinging her face. The cold swallowed her breath as she stepped outside. The bear stood only a few feet away, massive and trembling, one leg dragging slightly. Its fur was clumped with ice, eyes glassy but alert. When it saw her, it froze. Lily raised her empty hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. "You don't have to be afraid." The bear made a deep, broken sound, something between a growl and a sigh. It lowered its head slightly, breath clouding the air between them. Step by step, she moved closer. She could feel the warmth of its breath now, smell the raw musk of its fur and the iron scent of its blood. The wound was worse than she'd thought. High on its shoulder, half frozen, the bullet likely still inside. She didn't know what she could do. Only that she couldn't turn away. Lily crouched slowly, picking up a small handful of snow and pressing it gently against the bear's side. It flinched, muscles twitching beneath its fur, but didn't strike. Its massive eyes locked onto hers, not with rage but weariness. "You followed your cub," she murmured. "You came back for them." Another gust of wind swirled snow between them, but neither moved. For one fragile moment, the wilderness held its breath. From inside the cabin came a faint sound, the hunter coughing, weakly calling her name. The bear's head turned sharply toward the noise. Instinct returned to its eyes, primal and defensive. Lily shook her head gently. "No, not again. No more pain." She placed her hand, trembling, steady only in intent, against the bear's chest. Its heartbeat thundered under her palm, wild and alive. Then slowly the bear backed away. It gave one final look, a deep, knowing glance that seemed to hold something human in it, before turning toward the trees. Its gait was heavy but determined, snow crunching beneath its weight. The sound of its breathing faded until only the wind remained. Lily stood there for a long time, the night closing around her. She wanted to believe it would survive. She needed to. When she returned inside, the hunter was slumped near the fire, eyes closed but chest still rising faintly. She knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "You're lucky," she said quietly. It chose to walk away. He didn't answer, whether from shame or exhaustion she couldn't tell. Hours passed before dawn came, pale light filtering through the cracks in the shutters. The storm had calmed. Outside, the world was still and white again, footprints leading from the cabin door to the forest, hers and the bear's, side by side for a few fleeting meters before diverging into separate paths. Lily packed a small satchel with food and supplies. When she stepped out into the early morning, she followed those tracks a little way, stopping at the point where they disappeared beneath the pines. In the distance, she thought she saw movement, a dark figure limping slowly through the mist, heading deeper into the wilderness. She didn't call out. She simply stood there, hand raised in quiet farewell. The forest seemed to respond, not with sound but with silence. A sacred kind of stillness, the kind that feels like acknowledgement. Lily turned back toward the cabin, smoke already beginning to rise from its chimney. She paused at the door, looking once more at the empty clearing. "They're not monsters," she whispered. "Just trying to live, same as us." When she stepped inside, the hunter was awake, staring into the fire. He didn't speak, but his eyes were different now, softer, uncertain. She offered him a cup of hot water. He took it without a word. They sat in silence as the fire cracked and the snow melted from their boots. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly, wounded, quiet, and alive. The forest doesn't always forgive, but sometimes, it lets you try. Lily learned that survival isn't about dominance but mercy. And somewhere out there, a wounded bear walked away, alive because someone chose to understand instead of fear. What would you have done in her place? Fight the wild or stand with it? Pawprints, if you believe stories like this remind us what it means to be human, like, subscribe and share, so more people remember that empathy belongs in the wild too.